on the air. All right, cool. Hi, so I'm here with Mary. I'm Jeff, and Mary's got some questions about VLOOKUPs. It's more about Excel than it is about us. So I'm going to go ahead and make sure that we're talking about Excel, which is this. Cool. So Mary, tell me what your questions are.
Okay, so pretty much I think I understand that. So a VLOOKUP is when you have data and you have a lot of data and you're trying to figure out how to literally look up one thing, one part of information, right? So you're trying to figure out, locate a certain thing within a column. Is that what it is?
Well, it could be a column, but it's more likely going to be a table. So the first thing we need to do is come up with some table of data. Now I had some ideas, but one thing I want to start with is making that. And I'm going to start with, let's say, coming up with a list of people. So there's you, there's me. Give me a couple more people.
We'll do Kate. We'll do
Kate with a C or K?
K.
Okay.
We'll do Danny, Rachel, and Maggie.
All right. No E on Maggie or E on Maggie. No.
All right.
Okay. And so let's say we want to know someone's favorite color. What's your favorite color?
Pink.
Pink. I'm going to go with green. Kate.
We'll say blue.
Okay, we'll say blue. Danny strikes me as a red girl. Yeah. Rachel likes her some pink too, doesn't she?
Yeah.
Or is she a purple girl? Or
we'll say pink.
I'll say pink again. And Maggie, she does like a burgundy. I don't know. We'll say doesn't matter, or if that's even how you spell burgundy. Let's go one more thing, because basically we're just setting up something here. I don't know. How about birth month? When were you born? May. Oh, happy birthday. When's your birthday?
It's the 14th.
Oh, well.
Day before graduation.
Yeah, right. Congratulations.
Thank you.
I was born in January. I'm guessing Kate was born in May too. Danny.
May.
Everybody's born in May. Rachel.
August.
Let's say August. Wonderful. And Maggie.
Let's say March.
March. Sounds good to me. All right. So now at this point we have basically three variables here: person, their favorite color, and their birth month. And what a VLOOKUP in this case would say, let's go to this table, look up somebody's name in this table, and then return a piece of information from one of these other columns.
Okay.
So this right here, this is our table, the stuff I have highlighted. Your table should not include your headers. I like to have headers because it helps keep the variables straight.
Okay.
This is the first column, second column, third column.
Okay.
We got 3 columns of data here. A VLOOKUP has 4 arguments: lookup value, table array, column index, and range lookup.
Right.
So the 4 parts, the 4 arguments, and those are the inputs, are what you're looking up, where you're looking it up, the column you want, and then the last one is exact or approximate, and we'll take a look at the difference between those two in a second.
Okay.
So those are the 4 arguments that we want to have here. So we'll build one right here. So we're going to look up somebody's name. Let's say we want to look up Mary.
Okay.
All right. The second thing we need to know is what table we're going to look up Mary in.
Okay.
And that's this table. Third thing we want to know, which column of information do we want to return? Let's say we want to know your favorite color.
Okay.
So we would say, give me the second column. And then the last argument is true or false, whether we want an approximate match or an exact match. In this case, I want an exact match because, well, it's your name exactly.
Okay, gotcha. Isn't it normally always exact? I mean, like 9 out of 10 times it's going to be.
Yeah.
And then you just take false.
You could use 0 or 1, and that's what I used here.
Okay.
I used 0 for false, but you could also type false here, and it will do the same thing.
I totally see. Okay, gotcha.
That's in its most basic form, but there's some other best practices. There's some other things you might want to be able to incorporate with it. There's some rules that you need to know about the inputs, things that you might want to change in terms of what else you look up. But in its most basic form, that's what the VLOOKUP does.
So you merely type like equals VLOOKUP and then in parentheses, and you put the first thing in like quotations, and then you just select like the cell.
Well, there's quotations are used anytime you're using string text. String is like words.
Okay, gotcha. Okay.
So, for example, if as opposed to typing your name here, I said use this cell right here as an input.
Okay.
It's going to return nothing because this cell right here, which is the input cell, it has nothing in it, so it doesn't have anything to return. I can type in Elvis, and it's still not going to return anything because Elvis is not listed as a person here.
Oh, okay, I see. Gotcha.
I can type Mary, and hey, it gives you pink.
Okay.
I can type Jeff, and it gives me nothing.
Okay.
Or I can type Jeff, it tells me green.
Oh, gotcha. Okay, that makes sense.
So one of the more useful ways to use VLOOKUP is to have what you're looking up, the input cell, to make that some cell that you're trying to find.
Okay, gotcha.
You can also do other dynamic things with this part. So for example, you have this one which says, I'm going to copy this formula down. I'm still going to use the same inputs here, but maybe instead I want this to return the birth month. So I change the column you want, in this case, the third column. And now it says Jeff's favorite color is green and his birth month was January. Danny's favorite color is red and she was born in May.
Okay, gotcha.
So as opposed to using like a specific number here or a specific number here, any of these different inputs we can modify so that it can be dynamic, and that's really the power of where this table comes into play. So
the reason why it works, like when you choose the column, is because the reason why is because you selected the column, and then since it's highlighted, it's like 1, 2, 3. That's how it knows that this is the third column. It has nothing to do with this 1, 2, 3, right?
No, it has nothing to do with the numbers up here. It's just because I've specified this as my table, and we can see Excel does this nice thing where it's in red here. One of the challenges that would have happened here, though, is if I just copied this cell and pasted it. One of the things that Excel is going to do here, let's slide down a little bit, is that it's now sourcing the table B5 to D10, as opposed to B4 to B9. You can see that it's moved the table. You're no longer included in this table. And in fact, E10 has changed as well. So it's looking up nothing here in a table which doesn't include you.
Okay, that makes sense.
Do you remember what we need to do to keep those cells locked?
No, I don't. You go over it again.
Yeah, of course. So there's a couple, I'm going to talk about some best practices too. But you remember putting the $ in here?
Oh, the dollar, yes. Oh, wow, it's all coming back. Okay.
Yeah. The F4 button is useful here because the F4 button, set up my function lock. The F4 button will cycle through where it'll put the $signs. If you have a $ in front of the E and the 9, this cell in blue, no matter where you copy this formula, will always be E9.
Okay.
So with this formula as is, I can copy that formula down here. It gives me an error because that table can't exist moving it that way. That's an Excel thing, but doesn't matter what happens here. E9 is still E9 because I got $ in front of both of those things.
So every time you put a $ sign in front of something, you're locking it so that it can go anywhere on the table.
Right.
Okay, gotcha.
I could have said, keep the $ in front of the 9. What happens when I move the formula now? I can move it over here.
Okay.
And now it's looking at F9. 9 didn't change because the $'s in front of 9.
Right.
But F changed because I moved the formula from this column, which said E9, 1 cell to the left of the formula. Now it's looking up 1 cell to the left of the formula.
I see. Okay, that makes sense. Okay.
That's also really important if you're talking about this table, because you may have to look up a bunch of different things.
Right.
but the table that you're using to look this up is always this. Like, we want this to always stay the same. So it's pretty good practice when you're putting what you're looking it up in, like the table,
right,
to make sure we've got those. We're always starting at B4. We're always ending at D9 because we want this table, don't move.
Gotcha. Okay.
You start to see we got dollar signs in a lot of different parts
That
here.
makes a lot of sense. Okay. So then do you have to do that in front of like the thirds, the column you want too? So the same thing could apply, correct?
Well, if it's just a number here,
Yes.
that number won't change.
Oh, right, true. Okay.
Wherever I copy it. That number,
Oh, right.
that one was different, but the one that got me a reference error here, it still says 2.
Okay.
So the only things that will change or that really need dollar signs are the things which, if I copy this function around, may change.
Okay. That makes sense. Gotcha. So the only thing I just want to clarify is, so what you're looking up and then where you're looking it up. Where you're looking it up is the table.
Mm-hmm.
And then what you're looking up is like the thing that so it could be either the favorite color, the name, or the month in this case.
Well, for this first argument, this one in blue, you're always looking up something from the first column.
Okay.
So this table
Yes.
only lets us look up person.
Okay.
If we wanted to look up color, and there's more advanced tricks to getting around this, but if we wanted to look up a favorite color, we could only go from left to right. So we would have to specify this is our table, and we would say, what is the birth month of someone whose favorite color is pink?
Right.
So we could set that up to say, all right, given somebody's, and we're gonna look up whatever thing we put in here.
Right.
So this is gonna be our input. Where we're gonna look it up is in this table here.
Right.
So whatever I type into this cell in blue has to be a color because I'm looking at something from the left side of the table.
Okay.
The thing I want to look up is no longer column 3 because my table here, C4 to D9, only has 2 columns.
Right.
So I'm going to be looking up the second column, which is the birth month.
Right. Gotcha. Okay.
Yeah. So in the case of this table,
I see.
the table's dimensions, it has only 2 columns. This is the first column. This is the second column. And you're always looking something up in the first column of your specified table.
Okay, gotcha. That's the whole left to right thing. Okay.
Mm-hmm. It's always a left to right thing. Yeah.
Okay.
So let's say someone's favorite color is pink. Their birth month is May.
I see. Gotcha. That makes so much sense. Okay.
But we also see here someone whose favorite color is pink has a birth month in August.
Right.
So what the process of the VLOOKUP function is it will start by going down this first column, whatever you're looking stuff up in this case, column C, because it's the first column of the table. And it goes until it finds a match, at which point it stops.
Oh, okay.
So if I were to, let's say, cut this row and move it here, well, let's modify my table a little bit. Let's go back to C4 to D9. Now it's starting at the top and says, well, the first time I see the color pink, the birth month associated with it is August.
Okay.
It's no longer going to return May because as soon as it finds pink, it stops.
Okay.
There's some ordering that's important for here. So we'll look at another example in a second. But that's an important part of the VLOOKUP. What the function does is, even though it says, and that's what this exact thing, false for exact. All right. False for exact match. It's going to stop whenever it finds the first one it sees.
So we use something like finding the most recent time so it's kind of going to be there's like a time frame kind of associated with VLOOKUPs.
It very much could be if you have things that are ordered that way. I'm going to show you another example here, and this is something that I use pretty frequently. Let's say I'm talking about someone's grade in terms of points, and their grade in terms of a letter. And those are the two inputs that I want. So I know that if someone scores, and I'm going to put these in a particular order, and it speaks to the idea that this needs to go down in a certain order.
Okay.
I'll show you. So if someone scores a 60, they're in the, let's say, the D range. So if you score, let me set this table up and explain a little more how this works. B. So this is a pretty common table, something like this, that I'll use for grades. And I'm going to show you how the approximate match works here. First thing I want to do is say, if I have someone who has a particular score, and their score is, let's say, a 65, I want to know what grade they should get. What grade should someone who scores a 65 get? Do they get an F?
No.
Do they get a D?
No.
Do they get a C?
No.
What do they get?
They'll get in between a D and a C.
In between a D and a
Right.
C, exactly. And that's the way the approximate function will work.
I see. Okay.
It'll go here and say, well, is 65 in this group? No. 60? Well, we got to stop here at 70.
Okay.
So it looks like this. So we're going to look up this number in this table.
Right. Okay.
What do we want it to return? Which column do we want it to
We
return?
want it to return in the second column,
Exactly.
and then it's going to be 1.
Yeah.
Right, because it's true. Because approximately.
1 or true.
Okay.
Either
Oh, you
one
do
of
true,
those.
right.
Either one of those works fine.
If you do true, do you have to put that? You have to put that in quotations, or just capitalize true? Okay.
Don't need to.
It doesn't matter if you do caps or not.
Nope.
Gotcha.
We'll change that for you, but it's
Perfect.
1 or true. It doesn't matter.
Okay.
So what this does in the case of an approximate match is it says that a 65 is a D.
Okay.
All right. Let's.
Oh, interesting. Okay, gotcha. That makes sense.
Yeah. Those are the two we're looking at. 65 is a D. But if I had changed this as opposed to true to a false, what this lookup is going to do is it's going to try to find exactly 65. Will it find exactly
Yeah.
65? So what's it going to return?
It's not available. Right. Yeah. Okay. Oh, that makes so much sense. All right.
This also means the order of the table is pretty important. Because if and it's going to give me, I'm going to have to change this a little bit. No, I don't. Turn this back to true. So it might change how this table works because of what it's looking up, where it finds a 65. Let me put this back where it needs to go. Make sure we're looking at the same thing. Yeah. So it's going to go here. It says 65 is bigger than that. It's bigger than that. It's not bigger than this one. So it's going to stop here and come back to 60 and give me a D.
Okay.
75. 75 is between 70 and 80. It's bigger than that one, not bigger than that one, comes back to this one.
Okay.
So the approximate match is really useful if this first column is sorted in the way it should be, or in ascending order, smallest to largest. It can be a little, yeah, come in.
We all set? It like struck me. I figured it out. Wonderful. The issue that I was having.
Cool.
Thanks so much.
Yeah.
I appreciate it.
Thanks, Robert. So if we change this case, we want to look up a 75. It gets a little funny because 75, it's telling me that a 75 is an F, and it's not, because what it does is says it's not bigger than that one, not bigger than that one. Well, it's bigger than that one, but not bigger than that one. Oh, golly, it's given us something. 75 shouldn't be an F. The VLOOKUP function, if you're using approximate match, really only makes sense if you're doing things in ascending order, smallest to largest here.
Oh, okay, gotcha.
So you could also, how about that? So if your data was somehow ordered as dates here, or let's say it was as opposed to being could be, week start. So the week that starts the 5th, the Thursday, Thursday. You could look up a date and it returns that. Or maybe you want to know the day after.
Okay.
Or the day after that. And, we say this is week 1, this is week 2, week 3, week 4, week 5. And now we've got week start, week name. So anything between the 5th and the 12th, so May 11th, that's still week 1. May 10th, that's still week 1.
Okay.
It recognizes, and I can change this to, that's the number Excel thinks, but I can change the format to look like a date.
Okay.
That's just formatting cells.
I see.
That's something different. But as far as Excel knows, the code it uses, the number 42,495 in Excel language means the 5th of May, 2016.
Okay. Yes, gotcha.
7 days later, 7 days later, 7 days later. So everything between the 5th through the 11th is still part of week 1.
Okay.
But if I were to, let's change this. Now I've gotten rid of the formulas there. Now it gets confused. It doesn't know where to find May 11th. We know that May 11th is between those two. But because it's in descending order, it doesn't know how to look up that date.
Okay.
If you're using the approximate function or true as the 4th argument, these need to be in ascending order so it can find something between there.
Okay.
So whether it's grades like 0, 60, 70 or dates of account transactions, you need to be looking these things up in ascending order.
Ascending order. Okay. But then if it's false or like exact, it doesn't matter, right?
Well, if it's false, if it's the exact match, you may not find it. So you can get the NA.
Oh, right. Okay,
It's not going to find the 11th in this table, so it's going to return NA. But like we saw here, is if you have two things which are duplicated in the column you're looking up, it's going to return the first one.
Right. Okay. That makes sense. Right.
You may also, if you use approximate match here, that's fine. But in this case, it's going to say look up pink E10, which is pink. Now this is, move this down just a little bit. It's going to look up pink in this table and giving you an approximate match. It lands on May as opposed to August.
Gotcha.
To be honest, I don't know the logic behind that part. I wish I did. I wish I could give you a better explanation.
Okay.
But what I can tell you is that and more often than not, the types of things you'll look up here, whether it's a person or like a transaction ID, because I don't know what sort of uses you'll have for this. But what I found is most useful is if there's something which is like an identification column. So we'll call this, no, I want this to be row -3. So I've got a series of transaction IDs. It's the first transaction, second, or this could be dates, and we could say, who was the salesperson? What was the amount sold? I don't know, whatever the case is, but we can have, Mary, Jeff. You made a whole bunch of sales, then I made one, and then Kate makes one, and then you make some more, right? We may say, oh, we need, and then there was some amount of money. So let's just say, setting up some data here. All right. So there's a series of transactions, and then the amount sold. Now you've told me before that you've used pivot tables, so you could say, all right, now we've got a pivot table. We want to know We don't want ID here. We want salesperson. Zoom in. Great. Now we've got, oh, I made more money than Kate and more money than you, even though you may have had, you know, more transactions. You had 5 transactions. I had 2. Kate had 1. Zoom up a little bit, but we got the amount sold. But that's different from being able to say, all right, transaction number 1. So we're going to make a little, I'm going to call it a calculator. And the thing we want to look up is the salesperson. And get a little more complex with this one. Salesperson and the, I don't know, amount sold sounds weird. Let's call this, give me the name.
Like a
Profit is
profit,
it?
yeah.
All right.
I'll say profit.
Profit. So yeah, we're making sales at a flea market, let's say, whatever the case is. So we're going to have a salesperson, and then we're going to look up a particular transaction. Let's say we want to look up transaction number 3.
Right.
Okay. This right here, this is the sales table.
Okay.
This is the table we're going to look up everything in.
Right.
Whether we're going to look up the salesperson or the profit, this is our table. We're going to use this table more than once, so I'm going to give it a name. Do you remember naming things?
No.
This box up here is our name box.
Okay.
Now the name box will say this is, and you give it a name. I've got the table highlighted, and this is where I'm going to look up everything. And this is going to keep me from having to type B9 or B4 colon D11 or anything like that. It'll keep the table from moving.
So what's different than that than like doing the $sign and locking?
This is a good question. It's not different.
Okay.
To me, this is it's a best practice because it just makes things easier to talk about.
Gotcha.
I'll show you what I mean. So let's do it that way first. So let's say we're going to look up. First thing we want to do is look up the transaction number. Transaction number 3,
right.
Where we're going to look it up is this table.
Mm-hmm.
Let's go ahead and lock it in. We're always looking it up in B4 to D11. Those things never change. The column we want to look up here is 2, first column, second, third column, look up column 2. And we're going to use exact match. Doesn't matter if those things are ascending or descending because the ID number is unique.
Right.
It's going to look for transaction 3. The salesperson for transaction 3 is you.
Oh wow. Okay.
This formula is useful. Let's say I don't want that column to change because I'm going to copy it over to the right. It's still looking up you. It's looking up that F4, that blue cell in this array. It's still going to return the second column, but I want it to return column 3 so I can see the profit.
Okay.
Transaction 3 was you for $31.46. Transaction 5 was me for $84. Transaction 9 didn't happen.
Right. Okay. Wow. Okay.
So you can set up this to do a number of different things. Now, when I set these up here, I used a function row. These are just more functions that help expedite making things easier. Not necessary to do it, but that also means if I wanted to here, G is the 7th letter of the alphabet. So if I said column -5, column -5, 7 minus 5 is 2. Let's look up transaction 1.
Gotcha.
Column 7 -2. Copy. Now that's just getting a little bit more complex.
Okay.
Using stuff like that. Not really what I wanted to show you here. What I want to show you about is the name box, because this table has a complex name right here. $B, $4, colon, $D, $11. Let's say this table had a whole bunch of rows and like just went on for a long time. And I'm going to use this table a lot to look up a lot of things. I can call this my sales table. All right, click out of here. If I drop down and say, what is sales table? Excel now has a name for B4 to D11 on sheet 3, and
okay,
its name is sales table.
Okay.
So what I could do is say, I'm gonna look up transaction 2 or look up at value. What is the table I want to look it up in called?
It's called, what was it, sales table?
So I start typing sales table. Look at that. Excel has that name now. It knows this thing exists.
That is great. Okay. Gotcha.
Sales table. Give me column 2. True.
Wow. Okay. That's incredible. So you can only do it one table. So like if you had 2 tables on one sheet, could you like hypothetically like name like 2 tables and then like use the box for 2 and then be able to choose which tables? Does that make sense?
So this second table, I don't know, this part,
Yeah,
I don't.
let's say for example, exactly.
Mhm.
So can I go up here, name that like say sales table 2 or sales table, yeah, and then be able to choose? Okay, so yes.
Absolutely.
Awesome. Okay.
So now in this case, I would, in sales table 2, what would we be looking up? What would the input have to be?
Well, you'd be looking at like the salesperson, the profit. So the input, what do you mean? What would the input be? That would
Right. So in this function, or when we use VLOOKUP this way, the input F4 had to be a transaction number.
okay.
So the only way, and it's the same thing here, it's the same thing we're looking at. For sales table, what we look up is an ID, because that's the first column in sales table.
But here we'd just be looking up a person.
Yeah, if we look up here, we'd be looking up a person, but we saw that, there are some challenges that we encounter here. If so if I were to look up, let's see, person and profit, the only way we can use this one, person, I'll make it me. I'm going to look up me in sales table 2.
Right.
Because that's the first column. There's 2 columns I can return. I can return the first column, but that would be pretty circular and doesn't really tell you much.
Right.
I can, which, if I look up Jeff, and then what do I return for salesperson? Well, you find Jeff. Say I want to return column 2, call it true. It's going to tell me that the profit for person Jeff is $69.15, even though there's 2 transactions for Jeff.
Okay.
So the lookup table is really most useful in circumstances where you either have a unique set of identifiers in the first column and you're trying to look up that identifier, or you have things in some sort of ascending column.
Okay.
And then you want to find something that might be between 2 things or is exactly one of them.
Okay, that makes sense. That makes a lot of sense. Oh, wow. That comes full circle.
Yeah, it's not the most complex thing. The difference between the true, this is the true version, because we're looking for things which are approximate. Or exactly. But again, you're always looking up in the first one here.
Okay.
Something like this, let me think if I can think of a slightly more complex way to do this. There's other functions you can use depending on how, just show you another thing that you can do with something like this. So right now, I don't like this one as much. I liked this. I want to return 3. I want to return 3. Right. That's returning 7 here.
Right.
What's neat about, there's some other functions you can do, and this should be ID, is there's another function which allows you to figure out which column these things are in. And it's similar to VLOOKUP. Now, this is just going to take you one step further. If the VLOOKUP stuff Looks good.
Yes.
So I'm going to match.
Okay.
And you can see it's got pretty similar inputs to VLOOKUP. It's going to have a lookup value and a lookup array, just the way when we were looking at this, wherever it went, what you're looking up and where you're looking it up. It's the lookup value and the lookup array. So in this case, I can have match this thing to this array.
Okay.
And then match type, go exact. What this is now saying is that when I look up ID, because that's my input, in this array, so the array that's in red and 0 means exact, it tells me that ID was the first thing in this array.
Okay. Oh, that makes sense. Okay.
Copy this over. It's now saying find salesperson, which is G3, find salesperson in this same array. It's not the first, it's the second input.
Okay.
Same thing for profit. Look up H3 in this, it's the 1, 2, third thing in the array. So now, as opposed to using 3 and saying I want the third one, I'm going to let Excel do some work for me. Change this to salesperson. This thing, as a domino falls, says I'm going to look up salesperson, find salesperson to be the second thing in the array, changes this value to 2, and now it's going to look up F2, 7th ID, in sales table and return H4, which is the second column.
Okay, that makes sense. Interesting. Okay.
One more thing that's pretty neat here. Those are all fine. We're still looking up. This is the thing. This is where we're playing. So we look up the 7th transaction, or maybe we look up the 3rd transaction, or we look up the 5th transaction. The only transactions we're ever going to be looking up are things right here.
Okay.
One more neat thing that's useful when you're using VLOOKUP is something called data validation.
I remember this kind of. I don't remember it, but I remember hearing it.
Data validation is under data.
Okay.
Says I only want to include, so once you click on data validation in this menu, and I'm looking for F5, I only want F5, my ID numbers, to be a certain set of values.
Okay.
And the certain set of values that I want to include is a list. And that list are the ID numbers.
Okay.
Now, I have a little arrow here.
Okay.
Which means the only things I can select from are the IDs which are listed there. If there's no ID.
Okay, interesting. So can the what is data validation?
Data validation.
That be used, for example, for like a salesperson to profit, or can it be only like a number?
You can do it the same way. Like,
okay.
If I wanted to do, again, say we wanted to look up, let's put a person here. I want to look that person up in that sales table too. Mm-hmm. Returning the second column because I want a number and then an exact match. Again, it's only going to tell me this first one here.
Right.
But as far as data validation goes, I want a list. This is my list.
So data validation is just a way for you to, like a faster way to like adapt the table and like pick up the information. Gotcha. That makes so much sense. Okay.
Now, when I selected the data validation for this cell, I said I want it to be C4 to C11, which is 3 different names, but you know, some names are repeated, which is why when I drop down here, I see your name so many times. If I wanted to, I could create a new sheet and just say, you know what, there's really only 3 people. There's you, there's me, and I think Kate was the other person on the list. Yes. I could say this data validation that I have here, the list I'd rather use is a shortened list. Now it's still going to look up those values, Mary, Jeff, and Kate.
Mm-hmm.
But now it's a shorter list and it doesn't show
I see.
multiple ones.
Interesting. Okay. That's amazing. That makes life easier. Wow.
There can be a challenge here with if you've got like 1,000 IDs, it can be a pain in the butt to try to come down and scroll down to all those. But that doesn't stop me from coming into the cell and typing the number 7. It'll stop me from typing the number 7.5 because it's not available on that list.
Okay.
So let's go ahead and type this into something we can use, and then it makes sense again. So a little calculator like this can be really useful, especially if you just say, I'm always looking stuff up in this particular table. Name the table. You can use something like match. And there's nothing wrong with, in generating calculators, setting these things up to be dominoes. If you wanted to, I say dominoes because it's first going to find salesperson is Jeff, profit is $69.15. But it's not necessarily directly looking up profit here. It's doing this interim step, which is matching profit in this header row.
Right.
So there's sort of a profit, look up profit in that table. It's the third thing in the index. And then I want to look up the third column when I generate this particular response. If I wanted to, I could change H4 to match profit in this array, true, close it. I think I've got there. But now this function is starting to get more unwieldy and complex than it needs to be. It still works, but I actually think it's easier to troubleshoot. It's easier to make sense of a shorter function. So I can just go back and say H4, well, what's H4? Well, H4 is matching profit to that index.
Okay.
Got it.
Perfect.
And I don't know what I did there. All right. No idea how I got that. It's button mashing. But yeah, that's sort of VLOOKUP in a nutshell. Again, I think it's generally most useful in tables like these. Don't include your header row when you're naming your table or when you're specifying the table that you're looking up. See, even now, I think this will go back. Yeah. Oh, yeah. So now that this table is named, sales table, VLOOKUP number. And if I highlight the table, Excel will change the name in the function to sales table because it knows that this table is sales table. If I don't include the 8th row, it's just calling it B4 to D10. As soon as I include it, it's like, oh, B4 to D11? You mean sales table?
Okay. That makes much more sense. I like seeing it up too. Makes it easier.
Yeah, and you can actually, you know, you can name that cell to, you can name a single cell and call that my input cell.
Oh, okay.
So now I can say VLOOKUP input cell from tape, or what did we call it? Sales table. And the thing we want is, oh, we can even name this and say, you know what we want this thing to be called? We want it to be your, I don't know, this column. One big VLOOKUP. I can't remember, what did we call this cell? Input cell in sales table using this column. Exactly. entirely in words.
Okay.
No dollar signs, no colons, no any of that. And it does the same thing. And in fact, well, it didn't change that one back, but yeah. And this also means if you've specified input cell and sales table, if I copy this formula, it still knows that input cell is here. It still knows this column is here. It takes some of the errors which come from forgetting to put a dollar sign somewhere. Like I copy this down, I might get an error because it's now trying to look up this value and this value, this blue and this purple.
Right.
When you copy a formula that doesn't have dollar signs, Excel also moves the locations of the inputs. But if you have named all of your inputs, Excel will never change the location because it identifies cell G4 on sheet 3 as being the cell called this column.
Okay.
Naming things can make your life easier in certain circumstances. There are times when it's better to not name data if you're copying rows or copying columns, but I tend to like it when you're using things like VLOOKUP because it makes the makes the phone booky nature of the thing a little simpler.
That's so true.
Other questions about VLOOKUP? Are we feeling like we've got a little something?
That. I feel really good about that. That really helped a lot.
The last part, I keep saying the last part. There's always so many more because as soon as you learn one thing, there's another thing to do. We could wash, rinse, repeat this whole thing with let's do it this way. Copy that into the sheet 7. And I'm going to paste the transpose. Column -4. This is the same table we had before, except as opposed to being, I think it looks much better like this than it does like this.
Okay.
But we can do the exact same thing we did before using an H lookup.
I was going to ask about that. Okay.
So we can call this sales table 3.
Okay.
H lookup. Oh, let's look up. Oh, yeah, let's make this our input cell. So the transaction 1, all the person here. So lookup, VLOOKUP, H lookup. So I'm going to look up that transaction in sales table 3. Row index as opposed to column, I want to use row. So which row of sales table 3 contains the salesperson?
So it's gonna be like 1, 2, 3, 4.
Well, we've got 3 rows, 8 columns.
Okay.
And we do columns for VLOOKUP.
Oh, so I say so it's gonna be either 4, 5, or 6.
Yes.
Right.
This is row as far as Excel knows 4, 5, and 6.
Right.
But the table, this is the first row in the table.
Okay.
Second row in the table.
Okay.
Third row in the table. So that's the.
Oh, I see. Right.
That's what input it needs. It doesn't need to know like overall row number 5. What it needs to know is for sales table 3, which is this thing in red.
Okay.
Which row of that table contains the person?
So 2. Yeah.
And let's get an exact match. Person 1. We do a horizontal lookup for 4. That's you as well. 5 is me. 6 is Kate, and so on.
Okay.
So an H lookup is the exact same thing as a V lookup, except in the case of a V lookup, we're saying we're going to first look in this column, look in this vertical piece.
Okay.
And find something that goes this way. These tend to be how tables are set up. So VLOOKUP is more common than HLOOKUP, at least in my experience.
So there's only one component of the formula that's going to change, and that's whether the row number or the column number.
Pretty much.
Simple enough. Okay.
Yeah. So, you know, if again, for something like a little calculator like this, being able to say, I'm going to look up that, but you can, let's say you've got, here's another application. I want to go back to VLOOKUP. HLOOKUP, again, it's just sort of a different version. Does the same thing, but looks it up horizontally as opposed to vertically. Let's clear all this stuff and say, all right, I know that you completed a series of different transactions. So Mary's transactions was 1, 3, 4, 7, and 8.
Right.
And I want to know the profit for those. I'd say, okay, look up that number in sales table. Which column contains the profit?
2.
Nope.
Oh no. Wait, the column that contains the column. Sorry. 1.
Nope.
The column 3. Sorry.
3.
3. I was looking over here. Yeah, 3.
Mhm.
Okay, gotcha.
So first column, third column of our sales table contains profit. 3. Transaction 1 was $9.31.
Okay.
Transaction 3, $31.46. $1.49. 1965. 56.23. For a total of 118.13, which we saw right there.
Gotcha. Okay.
So you may have a case where you have a series of different things and you want to be able to source all of them. You write this formula once, copy it down so that each formula below, we're always looking up column 3 because column 3 is profit.
Okay.
But what changes is this thing in blue, which is the transaction number.
Right. Okay. So it's okay. Gotcha. So every time you paste it below, it's just going to adapt to the input cell. And then it's, okay. Gotcha. All right.
It won't change sales table because it's named and it knows what that is. No need for dollar signs. 3 is the third column of sales table. That won't change. 0, false, that won't change. F6 is something that will change. But if I put a dollar sign in front of 6 and copy it down.
Oh, right. Then it won't change. Slash. Okay.
But if I put a dollar sign in front of F, the number changes, but the letter doesn't.
Right.
But I'm copying down. F shouldn't change. I still want to be using these things from column F.
Okay. That makes sense. Wow. Makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's
Is that in a nutshell?
I mean, yeah, I mean, that's a pretty big nutshell, but
No, I feel good about that. That's good.
yeah. And so what I think is pretty useful is once you start to use these or make one for yourself is that you keep it handy. Like if this is the type of thing that you make one of these and you're like, oh, this feels like a task I'll be doing more than once. You keep one of these handy as like a template because you're going to be building something else and you forget certain parts of this. And I do this all the time. Anytime I encounter a new function or formula with Excel is as soon as I learn it, I find an application. I think I might use it again, sort of keep it somewhere. And then if I need to do that thing again, I've got something I can look back on, which has, you know, the tools in it. And I say, oh, you just do the thing I did with the Mary, Jeff, and Kate sales table stuff. But as opposed to sales table, it's some other table.
Right. No, I'm definitely going to, that's actually what I'll do with this. That makes a lot of sense. Well, thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
I'll just, and this is chicken scratch table and stuff, but if there are parts of this which are useful to you, I'll just send this, I'll email this.
Do you mind sending this to me? That would be great.
Absolutely can do. The only other thing I would be concerned about is if any part of that demo, sometimes Excel isn't as friendly with, let's see what, or whatever the streaming thing was, with streaming some of the drop downs, some of the little pop-up menus that we were talking about. Sometimes the screen capture here doesn't do exactly what it needs to do. But hopefully we were able to talk through it. You can just remember where you need to click.
No,
If
that
you got
does.
questions, let me know. and
I
I'll
will.
help you out.
Thank you so much. No, that was so perfect. Really helpful. Thank you.
Cool.
Gosh.
Happy to help. All right. Maybe somebody else gets help too.
Hopefully.